Hi there. This time, instead of writing up a lengthy blog post, I wanted to try capturing a video to explain the case of the Gameslab. It's a little easier to show in a video because I can rotate it and we can look at it instead of having to take a ton of pictures and edit them all to the right resolution and stuff. So this is the Gameslab, and as you can see, the front panel is machined aluminum plate. It's anodized and brushed. I'm not a machinist. All this is manufactured by Front Panel Express, which I found out a long time ago from a DIY audiophile forum. And everyone on there loved them, even though they're kind of pricey. You can find cheaper places, but they specialize in front panels, and that's what I needed. And as you can see, the Gameslab uses kind of a sandwich construction. So there's a front panel, and then in the middle, on the other side of the PCB, there's a heat spreader. I originally thought that the zinc was going to generate quite a bit of heat, so I included a heat spreader. And I also wanted to separate all the circuitry from the big battery below. And yes, that is a huge battery. It's a 10 amp hour battery. It's one of the batteries that normally goes into one of those USB power packs for recharging your phone and stuff. So I originally didn't know what the power consumption of the zinc FPGA was going to be under different loads, so put a big battery. And it actually ended up being pretty helpful at SuperCon because the Gameslab lasted all day as a badge. So that was pretty helpful. The back plate is just the same anodized aluminum, and you'll notice the back plate has screw holes, but the front plate does not. And this is one of the most awesome things I learned that you can do with Front Panel Express, at least, and I'm sure other manufacturers. So that there's actually these little studs in here that the screw from the back screws into, and it holds everything together without having any screw holes or visible connectors on the front at all. So if we turn it over and take it apart, we can take a closer look at what the insides look like and how it's all held together. And these are just standard M3 screws. I bought a whole kit of M3 screws and spacers and washers and everything on Amazon, and that turned out to be quite the worthwhile investment. So now if I take these screws out, and this is where one of these mats with all these compartments is actually kind of nice. So now the first thing is this back plate. I've kind of attached the battery to the back plate just to keep it from moving around. So it's kind of tricky to disconnect here, but I'll get it disconnected. So here's the back plate with the battery attached to it. And the only thing really noticeable about the back plate is I shelled out extra to get the slight rounded edge on the back plate, so that way it feels nicer in your hands. It costs a little bit extra, but you know, since it was a one-off, I just did it. Next, you'll notice that on all these screw holes, there's a little spacer, and the spacer, I bought a whole kit of these, and I just found one that was the right height for the battery. So those hold or go next to the battery, and then below that, here's the heat spreader plate I was talking about. And the goal here was to kind of be like a heat sink for the zinc, but also just separate the battery from everything else. So if I remove that, you can see that was actually designed to kind of fit around the expansion headers and all the buttons and headers at the top. So I had to import the CAD design into KiCad several times as I iterated to make sure it fit around everything. Like, for example, see how that little cutout down for the USB connector? That was a late addition once I realized it didn't fit. Then below that, there's another spacer, and then there's one of these little slightly springy washers. These add a little bit of springiness to it, so when I'm screwing it together, it'll actually tighten up. Because there's a tiny bit of warpage in the board, and the front LCD is not perfectly lined up, so adding a little bit of springiness to it helped. So if I move those, now we can take the PCB off of the front, and underneath we'll find some more of those little springy washers. But I also see that the LCD is held on. Let me rotate it here. The LCD is connected with one of those Flex PCB Zebra, or not Zebra, but into a ZIF connector. And if I flip up my ZIF or zero insertion force connector, so one thing I learned on these zero insertion force connectors, oh man, is that these flip-up kinds are actually much better than the kinds with the little tabs on the sides that you push in. On a previous board for testing out the LCD, I had used the kinds with the little tabs on the side, and I learned that after inserting and taking out the connector a lot of times, they tend to wear out a lot faster than those flippy kind. So I definitely recommend these flip-up kind. And so here's the main board. You can see the front just has the buttons and a little slidey on and off switch, kind of like the Nintendo DS. The two thumbsticks, which were a royal pain to solder in place because they just have these little exposed pads on the bottom. Really annoying. I'll write up something or record something else about that. These tiny little speakers, these things are awesome. I've yet to get sound stuff working, but I really want to. And oh, and I have some little thermal compound like sheet that I cut out to put on top of the zinc. I need to get a better size though, because it doesn't quite get it against the heat spreader enough. Oh, and here is one of the fails I forgot to mention in the fails blog post, is that the SD card connector is the wrong way. So to actually get to it, you have to take apart the whole Gameslab and take the SD card in and out that way. And that happened because in the data sheet, I misread the drawing, which in my opinion, it wasn't drawn very well, but that'll teach me for picking the cheapest part on DigiKey. So yeah, that's about it for the circuit board beyond the other blog posts. And here's the front panel. So this little blab is just holding the LCD against the front panel off the circuit board. I actually need to figure out a better way to do this because it puts a pressure point in the middle of LCD, so when you press buttons it kind of creates a little shimmer on the LCD, which isn't too cool. But other than that, it's got holes for the buttons, and it's got a little meshy set of holes for the speakers, and it's got these nice beveled circular cutouts for the thumbsticks. And that's another thing Front Panel Express will actually do for you, is they'll do an engraving and then they'll fill it with color. It adds some cost, but I love the look of it. Then the LCD is held against the front panel by this little tiny double-sided tape. So apparently a lot of electronic devices, they use this little tiny, like 1 or 2 millimeter wide tape to hold the LCDs against their front panels, or even to hold a touchscreen onto an LCD. So there's actually a touch panel in this too, and it's held on by this little tiny tape as well. And then I have a bunch of Kapton tape on the back just to keep it from shorting out anything. Kapton tape is useful everywhere. Now, one of the things that's really cool about this front panel is these little standoffs here with the threads in them. So these, notice, they're standoffs on the back. If you look on the front, you can't see anything. That's because these standoffs, they're not fully milled through. There's like a cavity, and then these are pressed into that cavity so they stay in place. And you can get them in all different heights, all different standard screw sizes. But I learned from one of our Hardware Happy Hour members that these are not welded or anything. They're actually press fit into the cavity with a giant press. And they're solidly in there. Those aren't going anywhere. But what a wonderful way to create a clean front panel without any screw holes on the front. And it makes it so just 4 screws from the back hold the whole thing together, which is pretty cool. So anyway, that's kind of a quick tour of the Gameslab case. Let me know if you like this video format too, because I'm just trying it out.